Hello, everyone. You're watching Inside the Americas. Social media is everywhere these days. In today's show, our in-depth look at just what kind of effect the growing online influence could have on voters in the U.S. presidential election. I'm Jeannie Godula. Barack Obama was the very first presidential candidate to ride social media platforms to victory, building his grassroots campaign of 2008 on Facebook and YouTube. 8 years later, Donald Trump took it to a whole different level, saying himself, "Without Twitter, I probably wouldn't even be president." Since then, campaigns have been run almost more online than in person. And just like in the last presidential race, social media is once again swirling. So what have the candidates, intelligence agencies, and troll farms learned since 2016? And what's changed this time around? Our Peter O'Brien found out.
It was called the first true social media election. The 2016 presidential campaign saw candidates rise and fall in the online arena, a massive Facebook data leak, and an unprecedented flood of misinformation. How are things different or the same this time around?
Yes, they broke the law, but
this video with an anti-immigration message was pivotal to Donald Trump's campaign last election. Political analysts say it marked the transformation of Instagram from a photo-sharing app into a political tool. Meanwhile, Trump harnessed the free publicity offered by Twitter. His prolific populist posts continue to dominate political discussion today. The true depth at which people were being influenced over social media only became clear after the election, when it was revealed that millions of Facebook users' personal data had been taken without consent by Cambridge Analytica, then used for political advertising by the Ted Cruz and Donald Trump campaigns. Facebook's CEO testified to Congress.
And that was a big mistake. And it was my mistake. And I'm sorry.
Tighter restrictions on the use of personal data for political advertising were put in place ahead of this year's election. But for the FBI, another problem has proved harder to solve.
What concerns me the most is the steady drumbeat of misinformation. I worry that they will contribute over time to a lack of confidence of American voters and citizens.
In the last election, the Internet Research Agency, based here in St. Petersburg, deployed thousands of social media accounts, so-called sock puppets, posing as Americans, to sow discord and influence the results. Most of their posts would attack Hillary Clinton or promote Donald Trump, while others served to inflame debate from many different perspectives. Intelligence agencies know more about the threat now, but experts say troll farms have become better at disguising themselves, and they perhaps have an easier job this time.
Having more disinformation in the environment already that's available for the trolls to share without having to produce it themselves obviously does make the job easier. This is why it's sort of such a dangerous move by President Trump to be playing this card about undermining the sort of sanctity and undermining the integrity of the electoral process, because it plays into these narratives of foreign actors who also want to sort of claim that democracy itself is a flawed system of government.
Free speech protections make countering domestic misinformation difficult. Facebook and Twitter say they're clamping down and have been flagging misleading posts, even some of the president's own. For Trump supporters, though, that's just more proof that these companies are biased against conservatives.
To talk a bit more about the influence of social media on this year's election, let's bring in Caitlin Chin. She's a political analyst specializing in social media based in Washington, D.C. Caitlin, thanks so much for joining us. What for you is the biggest change in social media this time around?
Campaigns have shifted their strategy online this year due to COVID-19. People are spending more time on their screens, on their devices, at home because of social distancing protocols. Politicians are now realizing that it's important to reach out to younger voters, more diverse voters, women, all groups that use social media. And then people are also getting their news from social media now more than they had a few years ago. As a result, social media has become incredibly powerful. It's given presidential candidates a new way to reach out to voters, and vice versa. It also allows these politicians to target their message to voters, but it also introduces unique challenges of disinformation, content moderation, political polarization, user privacy. These are all issues that social media companies will need to address this year.
Are social media platforms doing enough to make sure misinformation is not being spread? For example, Facebook just banned QAnon across its platforms, including Instagram. Just to remind people, QAnon is this conspiracy theory movement that says Donald Trump's waging a war against Satan-worshipping pedophiles. Now, that ban's a big step up from Facebook's earlier decision on QAnon. Are moves like that too little too late?
Right. Banning QAnon now is a good start, but content removal it's a huge problem that goes beyond any one organization. When Facebook removes one platform, unfortunately, there are still other platforms where organizations or individuals who can spread disinformation. And unfortunately, some of them can be very convincing or come from public figures. Another very high profile example, unfortunately, is President Trump himself. President Trump is somebody who enjoys tweeting, and after the New York Times, for example, released his tax returns about a week ago, President Trump tweeted that the New York Times article was totally fake news, a claim that he has so far not substantiated. He has also tweeted that information regarding polling, mail-in voting, and COVID-19 is fake news. Currently, it is up to the social networks like Facebook or Twitter to decide how to address these claims and whether to fact check or even remove fake posts. So speaking of policy changes this year, in May, Twitter placed a fact-checking label on President Trump's tweet for the very first time. A couple months after that, Facebook began labeling some of Trump's posts. So going forward, this is a very pressing issue. This is something that social media platforms need to address, and potentially even something that Congress might take up with new legislation.
Caitlin, stay with me. One of the many new words that's entered the social media lexicon, of course, is influencer, those people who fill our feeds with the purpose of getting us to think and act just the way they do. And with COVID forcing more and more campaigners to stay home, social networks are overflowing with influencers, pushing both candidates and ideas. Catherine Cater-Clifford takes a look.
Post-COVID-19, campaigning has gone from door to door to screen, as influencers take up more and more space on the US political landscape.
I can name Kung Flu.
On the Republican side, Ben Shapiro is one of the more popular influencers. With the benefit of a background in communications, he counts over 7.5 million subscribers on his Facebook page. He writes numerous articles for the right-wing website The Daily Wire, which he co-founded, and hosts his own program, The Ben Shapiro Show.
New details emerge in the FBI investigation into Trump campaign members, and they are damning for the FBI.
Donald Trump can also count on media outlets like Breitbart, a right-wing site which used to be led by his former advisor Steve Bannon. Meanwhile, there are less conventional recruits on the job. Sisters Lynette Hardaway and Rochelle Richardson are known as Diamond and Silk, former Democrats who crossed the Republican side. The controversy-prone sisters are now airing pro-Trump shows online.
You had Jim Crow Joe.
Yes.
Tell a lie.
On the Democrat side too, influencers are gaining ground. Among them, Jon Favreau, a former speechwriter for Barack Obama, who counts over 1 million followers on Twitter. Along with fellow hosts from political communication backgrounds, he launched the Pod Save America podcast, making no secret of his aversion to Donald Trump.
As Trump spent more than 90 minutes shouting down Wallace, interrupting Biden, and spewing all kinds of lies, insults, conspiracies, and complaints.
Joe Biden can also count on artists such as rapper Cardi B,
Hi, buddy. How are you?
who has 73 million followers on Instagram. A former Bernie Sanders supporter, she joined Biden's camp in a bid to block Trump.
Crazy stuff that have to happen so they could open their eyes for the past 4 years.
Well, it doesn't have to happen. The vote matters. That's why you keep talking to people about the need to vote.
One of the most unusual lines of support, a brand of cosmetics named Biden Beauty, which sells Democrat blue-colored products. The profits are donated to Joe Biden's campaign, but those behind the mysterious venture remain anonymous.
I'm going to bring back in my guest, Caitlin Chin. Caitlin, how much do candidates like Trump and Biden count on influencers like the ones we just saw there? Is there any evidence that more likes mean more votes?
So social media is transformative in politics. It does allow users like influencers to foster strong social movements and attract a lot of likes, votes, retweets. However, I will say that it has its limitations. More engagement online, more shares and retweets don't necessarily translate into higher voter participation. And this is because there is a smaller percentage of highly involved activists, like influencers and their followers, that do account for a larger percentage of social media engagement related to politics. It's a little bit more difficult to engage with people who either do not use social media or who do not use social media for political purposes. And this is evidenced by the fact that voter participation has not significantly increased over the past 3 presidential election cycles since social media came into play.
Caitlin, we've talked a lot about the negative side of social media. Do you still believe social media and politics can be a force for good, particularly in the states at the moment where things are more divided than ever before?
I think that one huge issue at the moment is that there are so many unknowns. To some level, most people agree on the basic principles that we want to encourage security and fairness and voter participation while discouraging things like disinformation and bias. But when we take social media, we believe that there is so much potential for increasing voter engagement, but we also don't know. We don't know what their overall effects will be on consumer privacy and competition and cybersecurity and disinformation, whether the platforms really do have the benefits that they're describing, or if they actually result in more harm than good. But we can discuss these issues, and that's something that's really important for Americans to do as a democracy of informed voters, and especially in the 2020 presidential election.
Certainly is. Caitlin, thanks so much for that. Caitlin Chin is speaking to us there from Washington, D.C. Thanks to her. Thanks to you for watching. Stay with us here on France 24.
Special events.
It's one of those events you cannot ignore. Every 4 years, all eyes are on the White House. Donald Trump or Joe Biden? Who will America pick as its next president? Will the Republican incumbent stay in office, or will his Democratic rival unseat him? Throughout the campaign, our correspondents and guests will discuss the issues at the heart of the election.
Follow election results in our special edition beginning on the 3rd of November on France 24.